The National Constitution Center President and CEO Jeffrey Rosen joins us now. His new book is titled The Pursuit of Liberty. It follows his previous book, The Pursuit of Happiness. Jeffrey Rosen, I think I know what happiness is. What is liberty?
Liberty is the eternal and enduring battle between Hamilton and Jefferson. That's what I discovered in writing this book. It was so much fun to look throughout American history and see how the competing positions of Hamilton and Jefferson on a couple of issues have defined us from the beginning. In particular, their battles over national power and states' rights, executive power versus judicial power, liberal and strict construction of the Constitution, and democracy versus rule by elites. Those four antitheses all go back to their battle over the Bank of the United States, and they were the cause of the rise of our first political parties, and they have defined us ever since.
On what liberty is, when the Constitution talks about being written to secure the blessings of liberty, and the Declaration talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, are they using the same definition of liberty? Are they talking about the same thing?
That's such a great question. So the Declaration comes from many sources, but in particular John Locke, who says we're born in a state of nature with rights of life, liberty, and property. And the phrase blessings of liberty in the preamble to the Constitution, I recently discovered it was written by Gouverneur Morris, a great unappreciated hero, and it came from Cato's letters. Trenchard and Gordon, in their opposition in the English Civil War, talked about the blessings of liberty. So different sources, different centuries, but the point of this book is that although Hamilton and Jefferson agreed that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are natural rights, they disagreed about how to balance liberty and power in particular.
Securing liberty, securing the blessings of liberty.
Exactly. That was Jefferson's phrase. How do we secure the blessings of liberty? For Jefferson, every increase in power threatens liberty. For Hamilton, increases in power can secure liberty. And that's really basically a battle about the role of government. Should it be centralized or decentralized, national power versus states' rights? And that's the basic fissure throughout American history.
One quote or one paragraph from your book, and it paints a picture of the two views between Hamilton and Jefferson as strings sewn throughout the course of United States history. You write, the competing positions of Hamilton and Jefferson are like golden and silver threads woven throughout the tapestry of American history, sometimes side by side, sometimes crossing each other, and at critical moments pulling so far apart that they threaten to snap. From the founding until today, the tug of war on both ends of the threads has sustained the productive tensions that keep American politics from descending into violence. And whenever the threads have been pulled too far in one direction, both sides tumble over and the shooting begins. What is this tug of war? What are the two competing positions?
I'm so glad you picked that passage. The image of golden and silver threads did come to mind, and I imagine throughout American history, both parties tugging on either sides of the threads. I mean, the threads are how far to go over to national power and centralized government, or states' rights and decentralized government, or over toward democracy, or rule by elites, or liberal versus strict construction of the Constitution. Those are the antitheses. And what's so exciting about American history, and also striking, is that both parties, Republican and Democrat, liberal and conservative, are invoking Hamilton and Jefferson by name at all the crucial turning points. And they're constantly switching sides, and starting with the moment that Jefferson, the great strict constructionist, abandons his principles to buy Louisiana and double the size of the United States, embracing the broad construction of the Territory Clause that he previously rejected. That's happened throughout American history with political parties and presidents and Supreme Court judges. But despite that flipping and crossing and tugging, they've maintained the essential gravitational force. They've maintained the vital center. And I said, when people abandon the principles, the shooting begins. It's the rare moments in American history when you have John Calhoun saying that the Declaration is a self-evident lie and slavery is a positive good, or radical extremists on both sides rejecting the liberal idea. That's when we have violence.
If these are golden and silver strings, do you find one being more valuable than the other? Are you partial to the golden versus silver? And if so, who's golden and who's silver?
Well, you know, the National Constitution Center, I'm not allowed to have any opinions whatsoever. It's a nonpartisan institution. But as a historian, I started off this book saying, I'm really not going to take sides on these initial battles. Previous historians have been unapologetic partisans for one guy or the other. Henry Cabot Lodge, a big Hamiltonian, is constantly dissing Jefferson for being a coward during the Revolutionary War. Claude Bowers, FDR's favorite historian, exalts Jefferson and says Hamilton's the heuristic tool of urban elites. I thought readers have to make up their own minds. And there's another sense in which it would be silly to take sides with Hamilton and Jefferson, because they're both essential. They're enduring. They're throughout American history. There is one phrase, it's not in the book, but I love Gilbert and Sullivan, and there's a great line in one of their shows. Every girl and every boy that's born into the world alive is either a little liberal or else a little conservative. And that's the kind of essence of Hamilton and Jefferson. They're constantly against each other. We don't take sides. We just have to let people make up their own minds.
For folks who might look at the title of your book and see this as a book about old dead white guys, what are the Hamiltonian and Jeffersonian fault lines that we see in this country today? How does it apply in 2025?
My goodness, just listen to C-SPAN and you'll see how incredibly relevant the Hamilton and Jefferson battle is. Let's start with the battle over executive power. This is the huge question in this country. Some people say that President Trump is a kind of Julius Caesar figure who's trying to consolidate all executive power in his own hands and subvert the separation of powers and undermine the republic. Others say he's Andrew Jackson, who's a populist trying to shrink the size of the federal government, attack elites, and resurrect democracy. That battle goes back to the very beginning, and the book begins, if I can tell the story, with the fact that both Hamilton and Jefferson are fearing a Julius Caesar character. Shall I
Please, the dinner party that defined America.
It's just amazing. It's in the room where it happened, which is not the one that the musical celebrates, where they moved the capital to D.C. in exchange for assuming the national debt. This is also at Jefferson's house, and it's a year later. And the cabinet is gathered, Washington's away. At some point in the evening, Hamilton looks up and says to Jefferson, "Who are those three guys on the wall?" And Jefferson says, "Those are portraits of the three greatest men in history, in my view, John Locke, Francis Bacon, and Isaac Newton." And Hamilton pauses for a long time and then blurts out, "The greatest man that ever lived was Julius Caesar." And Jefferson writes in his diary that night, "This proves that Hamilton is not only for a monarchy, but a monarchy bottomed on corruption." And he goes on to found the whole Democratic Republican Party in supposed opposition to the Caesarism, the monarchical ambitions of Hamilton and the Federalists. And that fissure between rule by elites or monarchy and democracy defines the parties for more than 100 years. The story is so striking because, as Ron Chernow says in his biography, Hamilton was probably joking. He also fears Julius Caesar, but from below rather than above. He thinks a Caesar will flatter the people, persuade them to surrender liberty, and install himself as a dictator. And here's the relevance to today. This leads to a disagreement between Jefferson and Hamilton about presidential term limits. Jefferson's solution to a would-be Caesar is a one-year term limit for the president, so he won't be tempted to...
1 year?
1 year. Oh, one term, rather.
One four-year term.
One four-year term. That if he can't run again, he won't be tempted to subvert elections. Hamilton has the opposite solution, a president elected for life. Because if the president's elected for life, then he can serve the public interest and won't be flattering the people. That was radical at the convention. There were gasps when he made this suggestion. But I've learned that, in fact, at different times of the convention, Madison and Gouverneur Morris supported life terms. So he wasn't totally out there. Nevertheless, that obviously went down. Hamilton then, in the Federalists, defends the decision not to have life terms on the grounds that you might have an emergency that requires vigorous executive action. For the rest of American history, some presidents have been attacked as Caesars, in particular, Franklin Roosevelt, who dresses up as Julius Caesar at his birthday party in 1934, and Eleanor is dressed as a Roman matron, and they're kind of making fun of all the Caesar talk. But then FDR runs for a third and then a fourth term, and in 1945, after he dies, 80 days into his fourth term, Republicans take Congress and start to introduce the term limits amendment that becomes the 22nd Amendment. It's ratified in 1951, and the debate over the amendment is the same as the Hamilton-Jefferson debate over Caesar's, and the successful proponents of the amendment say that a president shouldn't be able to extend his power indefinitely, and you have to maintain democracy and the rule of law. So, as always, it all goes back to the room where it happened.